Hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay.
She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in? Oh, okay.
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in? Oh, okay.
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in? Oh, okay.
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in?
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in?
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in?
Look, it's a big gap with them. She needs to move forward.
You're not gonna stay and listen in?
Testing. 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 Testing.
Testing audio. Testing audio.
You're like me, Sophia. Thank you. How did you do it?
Radio.
Thank you.
Testing. Testing.
Testing. Testing. Testing. Okay, I muted the main YouTube page and then I'm leaving this one open with Zoom.
screen, most of the camera be on this? Or will it
Majority.
be- Megan,
You're good. Oh, it's good. It's capturing you in the screen. Small.
in YouTube.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's on there. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's it. In that deal, see. Shay Harrison Associates, yeah. Panash, the Shkaya Office of Navajo Government Development. The Executive Director in the game, as a Shanana Shisha. I call the Nench Lenegate here on each day. The treaty, but she's chain. Behind that chain, or for the treaty, that should not. I just seen a shot in the raven on it. Say where the Hajana, than hot, so what nation. I don't want to see that shot. Now she, I don't. At the yard, at the home of the. Oh, unsolving. Arashanan, the Shishinigin Executive Director, Office of Navajo Government Development. Go back in days, Nishige, Commission on Navajo Government Development. Aja 12. That's that. I think you see that's that nice. You've been it's not an active Celine. Never can be in this. We can there should be in the government reform that 1989 issued by Bahashnapol. Office of Navajo Government Reform, go commission. That is 1989 that government, but then again, on do class no. Ain't you now should be. For think where Asian is the Bahashnapol. Question staff for validation introduce it about knowledge.
Oh, yeah, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Shinda A. Charlene, so I don't Twitter condit Nasha. Now, da den national, but I think Bashashin Kachini, the Shache, Kachini, the Shanala. Adult, I am a policy analyst with the Office of Navajo Government Development. Yate.
Yeah.
Shay, Charlie, and she, go ahead, lead the national. Go Baba, Chin, Kilachini, that's not what you just say, with us and stuff. Shenley, say, Abamate, I used in a show, policy analyst and stuff.
Wel, da sy'n gyda hanner sendolig. Dos, assessed ESOL, bahadeshna. Gyda na siya the government reform. And again, 1989, that she hahol cheese, 80, you see bahashna to the slideshow there. Aro, even the she government reform proposal, that. Now, so it's got the this past July, that unveiled the Chin Leisure. A cop. The Sadish Zohoki. At the government reform proposal, the government endorsed nation to class. Nego, in that source of the it's about 108 pages. Ebony na do the never had a and based on Ayabapo. Based on the Johanna in it's a hot Sunday. A cop. The website, the website, a quag not so city. So there's a copy of it. Out of the net of the go ahead and go to our website. And if you want a hard copy like this, print it out for yourself. The never date need the head of the badger. And raise all in Navy cloud, the young the never trade the home. Even in Aya, the no senator, the Donald sauce, na shadow lake, which either lake than a song. As I had that and a half bar, print out that all things, if I ate in the year. A call. Robotishne. I see when they Nashia at Tagahot, Zanda, the Nabanata. The never Washington, they snow at the nether usually. Had right out and talk as notion. The Yatio open the Hasta 1989 and actually a riot Bahashnet or the Abbott's Ado. A Kodika. When they Michigan got the Navajo Nation government, the fatal flaw the one fatal flaw with what we currently have is that we did not create the government. We did not approve it. I don't buy that. See, though I don't pay that. See, Linda. Aro 1934, I thought the never thought needs a centralized government, the skin that no send get that no under a boilerplate constitution. 1934, on the ballot, it was defeated. The Navajo people defeated a centralized government, though that needs and that no. That is not. What ended? BIA Superintendent, Indian Commissioner, she be about Jingo. The government, the 1923, that oh geez. Let's say 1922, that business committee, the 3-person business committee. Aro Balachin, Navajo Nation Council, 1923, and 100 years as the event that we lago in Sahoho. Ada Nehedi Lagi, Ada Nepanaz Nishiki, Ada Neh in Zaniki, Gisha Aya, Isha Aya, Kaitado is Neta, no, Kati Sahoho. The tagging the Asia poster. Constitution de Kninnigi got the Queedishi, Takadal ya. The first one, Ita, 1937, Ada, Takadal ya. Aro approval yara, O Takadal ya. Aro na 1950s, around 1950, under the Navajo Hopi Rehabilitation Act. Ita Takadal and the council, the Secretary of Interior, which is net. They are lawyers and then solicitors. It's on the J. Dito at because any federal laws is at no. Ishi but in that name. I don't know that she's 1968 that. Raymond Nakane, chairman Salego. I thought Canada Constitution, but then again, I don't thought the name not the G. I issued all the house and the Hashin Yasha. Interior Secretary, Senator Dan Nego. Joe 1934, Yada under the Indian Reorganization Act. Out 1950s, that Navajo Hopi Rehabilitation Act. Navajo Nation, you can create a constitution, but under both of those laws, it required the Secretary of the Interior to approve it. Approve valid, it'll be valid. The first time, the second time, the council, the solicitor's office, thought it's on, you try that J, the whole team. I don't know what they sheesh. 1989, I thought we had some turmoil in the Navajo Nation government. But I thought Canada, Larry Russo, but that's a better son. She banana should other deal constitution that no. She banana she lad or not sauce. Navajo Nation ye sauce 20 laws 20 national shop. 8 thought Conash Kish. I don't hate other. Banas either. I don't know not this 2013 out of the the name Nadash, 2016 out of the Najnish. I call it dash Bilgara de nan banana shindy on a hahai Hande in Dal Nashon. Kadish change Nihita Hadadil Homo that nan sauce, yet Ishjana Ishtagi. He 108 pages, the Shindig, the in the whole cat, the never bears any, but says a late, but they no Conal sauce had the the never Washington, but they then again go state all that they no had a jumping in Nanagay, bears any, but that then again the laws. Was all this in the government. We have some Navajo Nation code. So Title 1, though Title 2, though Title 5. Title 2A, Navajo Nation Council in Michigan, go to President's office. Title 5. I couldn't stop. Business and all of that, maybe so. Title 7, the Shania Judiciary. I'll be that so. And also spares any you can cut the onish. The had the yagi, at ye Lawsiki. But now thought Title 1 be thought so, the cut the ROTD yan ke supreme law as a ate ben da ni zil do le sigi ben ye hadel ya eben na pa bit sessa lebe di no be ni che a ta ban se de case a ko ata de na the supreme law of the Navajo Nation. Ade yan ke supreme law then ke constitution at then eben na at the then lay bandai the thing the president or council delegates thought that it's like they have no guidance. There's any hadi the leg they can nish. The hidden any clinic down needs and I thought the nita that on an kita. Oh, I don't know source that hadi neta. And then the contract had the never done those so stop the nay end the dodger the nay yeah that at the on last legal on November 3rd 2026 I have now a government talk that's been a year that they had a deal yeah so the plan is we developed this document called the Nahokat the Navajo Ani which will serve as our supreme law of the Navajo Nation. And we will redo our government, reconstitute our government is what we call it, based on that document. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Why is it taking so long to do this? You said like all the way back from 1930s and why is it taking so long? Is it because what's the real reason? You gave reasons like it just disappeared and they never really worked on it, finished it and like, you know, what's the real reason why the Navajo Nation has never had, like you said, we don't have a constitution.
There's a variety of reasons. Like I said, over the last 100 years, we've developed one. But the first, up until 1985, everyone thought if we develop a constitution, it has to be approved by the Secretary of the Interior under the Indian Reorganization Act and under the Navajo Hopi Rehabilitation Act. So it was sent to the secretary and the secretary rejected it a couple of times. And then we developed one for ourselves and the Navajo Nation started to get more autonomy. And lately, I think it's just because the council had the authority. Things were presented to the council to say, make these changes. And in many cases, they didn't approve it. So the proposals did not pass the council. And then now, based on what I'm going to show you here, we finally have authority to go directly to the people and ask the people to vote on it, rather than having approval by anyone else. We don't need the secretary's approval, and then we don't need the approval of the Navajo Nation Council or the president or the judiciary. We just need the people's, and that's what I'll be explaining right here. So let's go on to this what this is. As I introduced it earlier, before many of you showed up, so I'll kind of say my name again. I'm Harrison Sosi, and I'm the executive director for the Office of Navajo Government Development. And this is my staff, and they introduced themselves earlier also. And basically, with the 2 additional office staff, this is who the Office of Navajo Government Development is. As you can see, we have a small office. We don't have very many employees in our office. But our job is to develop the Navajo government reform proposal. And that's what I'll be talking about. 1989, I'm actually government turmoil. Based on As at the base of evening, the next day, just like at the hotel, not the great hot and base of the next day, the president, Bill Nygren. Base of a Sunday, there's a legislative branch. Line item veto in that. Asian the Tado Sahasli, oh, the Nevada, Bahan. I don't at the ends of all just another scan that a niece of a Kaddish teacher. I call turmoil, see that, then again, others, and then there's none, Naka, government turmoil, man, none they on the Navajo Nation. Gosh, that eta. At a shaven na dosh to the eta. Ah, Kana and Nanika. On the lunges, the Nada tea. I don't there's none nanaha, and now the government turmoil, the next in nada the athlete. Rio out, Bata needs them. A call, the government turmoil, 1989, Ada, she bet athlete. The Kaya has nation, Big Bokias Ranch, but that, oh, Flagstaff. Flagstaff, it was on Las Vegas, show at Peach Springs, she Peach Springs for them, yeah. North of that, between the freeway and the Grand Canyon, of Anzao, Kaya, Shishwad, she, Bilgana, she owned each on a company. They wanted to sell that, the Kaya, the Hana had on the no. They will gonna sheet like ya ahanays, Navajo Nation. In the Hatosna. Hatosne, the call. Kayan chief, the appraisal eater, the quish bahana, the quish bahado live. Hatne or she appraisal ya. Did that the needs and the notion. The national that is, the Hata is, no bahan that said. But Brown, the year, the Yosha. Dinelt Bega appraisal ya. Dinelt Bahano, Dahatosne, a couple la Dishe a company. Landowners, the Gibbon, don't ye, but Latin the so lagin, ye, as Kada the Neshe, no, and then the has a conspiracy. Oh, she hall geez. A cop. The sheep asa, no, turmoil is lead. It's out of a car. This is out of the newspapers. McDonald was convicted of bribes, election fraud for his role in the Big Bokias Ranch sale. He was sentenced to 7 years in order to pay $50,000. Aro Belkana, one of the co-conspirators, Bud Brown, he was ordered to repay the Navajo Nation $4.1 million pertaining to the Big Bokias Ranch purchase. This came out of the federal courts. Federal courts, and actually the net stage out of on last evil. Out of the another hat of lake. So I found that so I don't know. Then that's all lot machine, but that no. Out of the now a month later, Peter McDonald was indicted by a federal grand jury pertaining to a July 1989 riot. She paid us newspapers that we caught the controller's office at Wondersham. If that and then that his spies overhand that said. Is she a 14 riot at Nenegi Ajit Salaya Tihikai? Based on these misconduct and allegations against McDonald, the Navajo Tribal Council during winter session in February of 1989 placed Peter McDonald on administrative leave. that's a that's a newspaper that these are photos of the riot. And the reason why I show this, I only have like 5. We have a whole slide that this was the evidence collected and used by people that helped the US Attorney's Office do the prosecution. So these are some of the films to reconstruct the events that occurred as a result of the riot. Panel say he what the these were the McDonald supporters. That's send them the Jahanal Kitoli. Some more photos of the riot. And then you'll see here, some of them are holding these sticks and so forth. So they had prepared some something to use in the riot. So that seems a lot. They were more or less I don't know if they were defending themselves. They were showed there to keep the peace, and it resulted in a riot. Okay. Because of that riot, the Navajo Nation Council had to respond, do something about it. I got the Department of Justice, the older folks that was working here at the time. The United States government came in and said, you need to do something about that situation, the riot and the conspiracy. If you, Navajo Nation, don't do anything about it, we will come in and take care of it. We'll do something about it. Change the and get government. Evening now, the Navajo Nation Council was basically, I don't know if they were forced, but they said you had to do something about it. So our lawyers went to work and various council delegates. There was a name for some of the people that were against Peter McDonald, the 49ers, they know, Navajo Nation Council. They're the ones that put him on administrative leave. Resolution, council resolution, CD 6889 is probably one of the most important resolutions passed by the Navajo Nation Council in the last 40 years. Okay. This is where the government was attempted to restructure. Number one, they created a temporary government under CD 6889. But that we're operating under a temporary government. On the lunch ago, they think she had taught me on the whole time. Aro Nashik. On the lunch ago, they taught me that. At the ends of 35 years at a band, Dave Nish. Aro. The second thing that happened, the chairman was the head of the legislative branch, the council. He automatically was the leader, or the folks that was the leader of the legislative branch, 88-member council, the Shanina has come. 1989, across the street, you got President created the president that by this resolution, they created the president's office out of the vice president. Out of they created something called separation of powers. those checks and balances. The government has another was this temporary government we're creating. She had nego the nenda has ita Class C resolution because the BIA for the seat and the Navajo Nation Council not job. Malaysia did was I is tarting about a seat. Okay. Class A resolution it required the approval of the BIA. Class B required review of Auto Class C didn't require any action by the Secretary of the Interior. Though if there was something that the council passed, in certain cases that required the approval of the secretary before it came valid. 1923 all the way up to 1985. 1985, there was a case called Kerr-McGee versus Navajo Nation. In the U.S. Supreme Court, the Department of Interior, Secretary of the Interior, changed out of the council session. After that litigation, the Kerr-McGee case said, number one, the Navajo Nation has something called inherent powers of self-governance. A Navajo Nation, they operate under their own power and their own authority, not under any power delegated from the federal government. The U.S. Supreme Court. They've got sovereignty that they know. We're a sovereign nation, that happening. That was part of the history. That's a whole nother story. I could spend another 2 days talking about Navajo Nation sovereignty and the federal tribal relationship. But that's different. But based on that case, they reiterated that it's not required that you have to go to the federal government for approval, because the Navajo tribe of Indians has inherent powers of self-governance, and they don't need any approval by the United States government. That's what that case stands for. And then they even went further and said the Navajo Nation rejected the Indian Reorganization Act back in 1934. So the provisions of the IRA does not cover a tribe like the Navajo Nation who rejected it. So based on that case, we could say that the there are certain things that the Secretary of the Interior that they're currently doing was already struck down by the Kerr-McGee case. Anyways, we haven't gone that far, but some of it, they still exercise authority, primarily our lands. So, all of you have probably worked with a resolution. And when you draft up a resolution at the front, there's a whereas section. Whereas the copy. That's not the real action. Now, therefore, is for the real action is. But these are recitals. So this is the recitals of CD 6889. Recital number 2. Recent controversy involving the leadership of the Navajo Nation has demonstrated that the present Navajo Nation government structure allows too much centralized power without real checks on this exercise of power. Experience shows that this deficiency in the government structure allows for advice and has resulted in the abuse of power. This is whereas clause number 2. Remember 1934, this is from 1989, DIPA resolution H. 1934, yeah, the Nebatani solves a ballot on a ballot question. They rejected a centralized government on the needs in the Indian commissioner circumvented the vote of the people and imposed it on us anyways, the central government. So this is many years later. Number 3, and whereas number 3, the judicial branch. Oh, a lot of this stuff is on our website. So if you want to see it, you can go to our website and see these presentations, this slideshow, and so forth. I can't your website. The nation and the The judicial branch has been reorganized by the Judicial Reform Act of 1985, and treating the judicial branch as a separate branch of government has proven to be beneficial to the Navajo Nation and has provided stability in the government. I don't need 1989 on that. Remember, it says 1985 on that, right after the Supreme Court decision, or right around the Supreme Court decision. Okay. Adding a new branch of government. Yeah, we only had the council. Aro, we had 2 branches, the council, though the judicial branch. Aro Tipe, this particular resolution, 1989, we created a 3-branch government. So we didn't have a 3-branch government until 1989. Hey, that's about so. So, whereas number 4 and CD 6889 says the lack of definition of power and separation of legislative and executive functions have also allowed the legislative body to overly involve itself in the administration of programs, thereby demonstrating a need to limit the legislative function to legislation and policy decision-making, and further limit the executive function to the implementation of laws and representation of the Navajo Nation. So, this is what the council was trying to create in 1989 with a temporary government. Of course, these chapters of the Navajo Nation Council, a lot of them kill. They young kid that now. They say that based on the fact no. So does this sound familiar? The legislative function to overly involve itself. Whereas number 5, there is an immediate need to reorganize the Navajo Nation government by defining the powers of the legislative and executive branches and impose limitations on exercise of such powers. Remember, this was a resolution by the Navajo Nation Council. And they said, we recognize there's these deficiencies in our government, and we're going to try to fix it with this resolution. So they were trying to define the powers of the legislative and executive branches. 1989, whereas number 7, the reorganization of the Navajo Nation government as proposed herein is intended to meet the immediate needs of the Navajo people for a more responsible and accountable government. So they said this is going to be temporary, intended to meet the immediate needs of the Navajo people. So that's what this section means, is the government we're creating will be temporary and will have no effect on the long-term government reform project, which will proceed as authorized and directed by the Navajo Tribal Council. So they created something else called the Government Reform Project. Donald Sos Hadatilia, the anti government dog casa, Nigo, Bendahuita. Ako, the 90 Doja, the Dahandol Sos and a referendum. Yendi Geo Ea Lana Whereas number 8, it is in the best interest of the Navajo Nation that the Navajo Nation government be reorganized to provide for separation of functions into 3 branches and provide for checks and balances between the 3 branches. So on a temporary basis, the temporary government will create a 3-branch government, which will be comprised of the legislative branch, the judicial branch, which those 2 already exist, and then we're creating a new branch called the executive branch with the president and vice president. The 1989 and they said there'll be separate functions, separation of functions, and then to provide for checks and balances. Until, see, this is all temporary. Until the Navajo people decide through the government reform project, the form of government they want to be governed by. Of course, this was a promise. I'll tell you how it was interpreted as a promise. The council made a promise to the Navajo people that they would have an opportunity to vote on a new government. For these changes, these are the one name that even enough, but only family. So so there was a 3-branch government, separation of powers, checks and balances, and it will be temporary upon need. 1989, that's recognizing that the government that we had was created by the Indian Commissioner, not by the Navajo people under our inherent powers of self-governance. And then that's what the Supreme Court said is, through this provision, whereas number 8, the Navajo Nation Council finally recognized that the Navajo people have inherent powers of self-governance. So that's what we'll talk about here as we move along. So that's key. So you have to extract these things, these positions, out of what's written, whereas provisions. So CD 6889, Title II of the Navajo Nation Code, that made amendments, Title II. And they created the Commission on Navajo Government Development and the Office of Navajo Government Development with quasi-independent authority to accomplish the people's project of instituting reforms necessary to promote the Navajo people's interest to ensure an accountable and responsible government. That's out of the Shirley versus Morgan case. So today, we're here to tell you about the reforms that we're proposing in this document. It's key because the Office of Navajo Government Development and the Commission on Navajo Government Development is the only entity that's legally authorized by Navajo Nation law to redo the government. The reason why I tell you that is once we get this project going, there will be a whole lot of people. We have a better proposal than no Portuguese about Jeff. The Hihaji than us and no. But under Navajo law, what we're presenting you and our office and what the work that the commission and the office did on this document is the only legally authorized reform proposal by the Navajo Nation. Out of the Commission on Navajo Government Development is established within the legislative branch. The commission is a special entity created by the Navajo Nation Council with quasi-independent authority to accomplish the people's project of instituting reforms necessary to ensure an accountable, responsible, ethically, and equally representative government. The commission shall be responsible directly to the Navajo Nation Council. That was recently changed and with an amendment to our plan of operations. We are not directly responsible to the Navajo people with respect to the overall activities. So this is some of our purposes in our plan of operation. Like I said, we're the only entities legally authorized to work on this project. And it says to develop recommendations and proposals for alternative forms of government for consideration and possible adoption by the Navajo people through a referendum vote. So on November 3rd, which is coming up in about 11 months, 2026, the same day that you vote for your new president, the same day that you vote for the council, we will also have a ballot on that election. And the ballot will be to approve this proposal. Right there it says, and possible adoption by the Navajo people through a referendum vote. That's the only way that this will become legal. And we've been going out to the Navajo people and doing presentations like this. You know, the Nenhanda ka. Ashitadon Hitanet Lida Chihtati, no. Oba Ehodas and Dasita. Oba Ehodas, Yadil Tip. Ayo Olgil. Ulashakshan, Ishin Benina. Ako. Chiyandan G. Kaha. Dinaha de Schlesien non Hacha. Ah. Ako Eha Shit and Nago Yuha Asan Linklet. Entitlements. Some kind of a gift or benefit. Our gift is a new government to change a better quality of life for every single one of you. That's the gift we're offering. On the hidden net, ordni naha nadol yes naha salad. A concayash is what again? The never ordni doles ma nadol tash. How's that for a gift? Right? We're giving you the best gift that you can possibly get. And to promote, enhance, honor, and comply with the foundation of the Diné. No. The we're not supposed to talk about this until the winter time, right? Hola. The calendar the earth no sun as it revolves around Johana. We all know that the sun goes around, the earth travels around the sun, right? In 365 days. There's quarters in this. Winter solstice is coming up in 6 days. That's when the winter begins. Aro, they'll just spring equinox, it'll just, aro, the summer solstice and the winter equinox, or the fall equinox. So that's our calendar, the nani, tlenigi. Ako, nahaga. Shigo, no, you know when Shigo is, once we get into the winter summer solstice. Aro, kadeya. Neda nisha keja hat khache bete na khayde nesa ye becheda that na ta yosha the you see the na kecha go be behanil senege ya eja hat kha di ge yan lay the fall equinox or the spring equinox ya bahaz an beni na nege ko ya gogi neste or G gogi. Our spring equinox, the daytime is longer than the nighttime. So we have situations like that, and our people recognize these things. So that's part of this, the foundation of the net law. A code. Bahan net go bahadeshna hadina. Hot end, these not be got some, no. Hajine do haste, hata she hajine section. Okay? The yellow world, the whole two. A coanda, the nani, clinigi na kahan net, we were in the spiritual form, get that, no. Aro question, the whole gay, we finally received our physical bodies. No, the hannet. Oh, no, the name is the hannet. That's you can't say yet. I thought the nanny clinic that for the lay up on that. My idea is that the four worlds he cut all what you cut over on that. Oh, I know. She's sad. Kiss what. Oh, no, she doesn't know has Dina Bash, not only. The big dog song get off name, Bahamas and only. Even in Navajo fundamental laws, the office in the National Day back in the late 90s, yeah, that go 2000 at the turn of 2000. Our office worked on this. This is the Common Law Project called This report is also on our website on the seasonal. If you look at our website, there's all these QR codes now. If you take a photo of this with your phone, it'll take you directly to our website. And up in the corner up here, you'll see some names. Seasonal, Bakagi, that's where the Common Law Project is.
Who's telling you to do this? I thought you guys would up level.
The commission, we have a 12-member commission, and we're the office workers. Our commission, nasi no ye landa Our stop ye landa sleep. The never
Commission is telling you what to do, right?
some
What to
plan of operation. The commission shall have the powers to develop a series of recommendations and proposals for alternative forms of chapter by the Navajo Supreme Court. To develop a series of recommendations and proposals for alternative forms of government and empowerment or other local community empowerment for consideration by the Navajo Nation Council and the Navajo people. By examining and utilizing the concepts of separation of powers and the delegation of authority to provide for the appropriate checks and balances.
I think
Navajo Nation Council CD 6889 on Kayla Na Nishnachai la Deben das Nishto Lation get on the in our plan of operation. CD 6889. This document is like 90 pages. They created the president's office, the executive branch. They created separation of powers, checks and balances back then, but that was for the temporary government. Our charge is to say, create a permanent government based on this authority. And that's where I'm saying we're the only entity that's legally authorized by law, by Navajo law, to reform or provide an alternative form of government. So this is our legal authority. The Navajo Nation Council. So the other things, to establish the responsibility of the Navajo government to protect the rights and freedoms of the Navajo people, to establish limitations on how the Navajo government and its officials may use its powers, and to define the powers of the Navajo people. So that's the charge that we have. Then to provide for short and long-term comprehensive planning. Right now, we were doing it piecemeal. The first thing that our office worked was on the Local Governance Act, 1990. The fundamental laws. So the council passed the fundamental laws. Proposals, regionalization, because the Russell McGee, when he was the president, vetoed that. So it didn't pass. But nevertheless, our office has been trying to do it piecemeal until 2010 and Shirley versus Morgan. The council tried to dissolve the commission. They dissolved the commission. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that because the Navajo Nation Council made a promise to the Navajo people that you would have an opportunity to approve a permanent government. Next year in the November 3rd, this will be on the ballot as a referendum question. This will become legal. So that's the plan. You'll provide a proposal and you'll take it to the people in a referendum. So that's the plan. Then we go back to the drawing board and say, why did they reject it? And let's take those out, or let's make changes here and there. So, because we have to operate under the temporary government until the Navajo people approve a permanent government.
When does it go into effect?
Immediately.
Make sure on the ballot, you make it clear, yeah, for the Navajo people. Usually some of them will say, yes means no, no means yes. That's confusing all this, so make sure it's clear for us Navajo people when you put it on the ballot.
All right, we'll take just a little bit for some questions and then we'll go back. Normally, I don't allow people to ask questions because this is a long, lengthy one until the end. Go ahead.
As I was driving up here, I did even check Gee, they are live on Thursday when everybody's at work. They don't have time to sit here. It's, John lady, get out the net, that daughter. It's, hotel, that has two, has two, the Sahata, two ladies, any the hat shade, another the. National Association, another what and it, the of cut or she don't know how she, what that, and no, ya had. Is can't be in Danish cut or she don't nigga. He used to talk about these things. Did or just need a did or just need a did or need all these things. And Nash wasn't he used to wake me up when I stayed at his home. But drop by his can't in his kayak. Now not was so late or she don't know. But if people really have any intention to know what's going on, to know and want to know and plan for these things. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours is the best now. Ado is can't don't know such as hot all day. But she the yacht checker me no never let a car is shut down by honesty. I say not asleep that the hot needs it. But a lot of these stuff we don't know. Of course, although June is at least that those of us that retire and sit at home. We have, time to come here. I don't let it, but now he's now she thought, actually, not the teen dojo. So anyways, why to bring them up, she not be sleeping.
We're streaming this, so that's why we're really not taking questions. And we're asking everybody to put their phones on
Silent.
the quiet mode, silent mode, because it comes up also. And because we're streaming it, we want to just go right to the presentation. There's a lot of people on the Facebook and YouTube that are watching. So we want to go through that. And the other thing is, if we have questions and so forth, the meeting doesn't flow or the presentation doesn't flow that well. And we're doing it for respect of those people that are watching on Facebook and YouTube.
I do have one quick question. This goes on the ballot. Will it be written in English or will it be written in
It'll be written in English. Okay, so going back to the presentation, this is our legal authority. And to collect, assemble, evaluate, interpret, and distribute information, data, statistics, and evidence. So up here, we have all these surveys that we've done. And this was researched thoroughly. There was a group of people put together to study the Common Law Project. Then our most recent one here is the Nebanata. We just released this one in July. And this is a survey we did over a year and a half. And we had the assistance and help from a PhD student, Alex Zell, his name's on here. And we went out to flea markets and we covered the whole res doing surveys. And our findings are in here. So this is the most recent one. Before then, there's all these other research materials that we use and develop to put the recommendations and the proposals into this document. This is what we're currently talking about. So that's how this thing is kind of structured. And let me finish this and then we'll go into talking about the document. To encourage appropriate educational curriculum designed to educate students and the general public on the governmental development of the Navajo Nation. So that's some of the things that we've done. A lot of this information and the charge that we've done is on our website. We have presentations, we have YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff on our website. And then this is talking about when the Navajo Nation Council in October 17th of 2007, they tried to abolish the commission and then put the office under the Speaker's office. And on July 16, 2010, the Navajo Nation Supreme Court issued an opinion and order to invalidate the council's legislation. And this is what the court said. The Commission on Government Development and the Office on Government Development are the sole entities established. So they're saying the sole entities established according to the wishes of the people. Therefore, the dissolution of the commission and changes made to the powers of the office on government by this resolution, CO 37 CQ or CO, my eyes are going cross-eyed.
CO.
Cannot stand, so it invalidated the dissolution. And they directed the council to reestablish the commission and along with proper funding. Kadis change it, Bashnagaya. Ayon the peso of Chino and it. A Kadi down yet Kadi calm. Chiand and Hatil Nika. Edo Tagoya teeth, Confena that the Nisho, the Nabatka that the face of a hatten. Evening, we're going to the Navajo Nation Council with the unmet needs request. We'll see what happens. Upon the and the court at the end said this is the people's project. So our plan of operation was amended. They struck out the council's project and put in the people's project. So this is your project. The Hinahasa led the Nenofinigi. Do a led Navajo Nation Council, do a president, do a judicial branch, do a federal government Hasalada, and the Hinahasa, because you have the power of hold the power. Inherent powers of self-governance comes from the people. And that's where I usually talk about a democracy. We're trying to create a democracy by this document. But actually a democracy. What is a democracy?
It's, people do the voting and the delegates supposed to help us in return.
So, simple terms, a democracy is ruled by the people. So who's the people again?
Us,
Us, 422,000 tribal members of the people. And the people are going to rule the Navajo Nation with this document. The way our government now structured, the way the BIA and the Indian Commission are currently structured it, is the council is the governing body. The exchange we are the governing body that they need to live and that need clinically. The here, the whole name, they need to live. That's what it's stop if we approve this document. And that's why it has to come to the people for a vote to approve it. So each one of you gets one vote. Should only get one vote. And we'll see how the chips fall at the end of the election, whether it's approved or not approved. And if it's approved, then we'll have a whole new government. We'll have a whole new future. Right? Based on this document. So that's the plan. So there's another presentation that keeps going, but I'll switch. So we'll take a 5-minute break right now and while I get my new presentation up.
Video off. You, Gotta turn it on.
Turn off in the back.
Oh.
Yeah, I tried pushing buttons and then just went to the radio. Slow shoot.
Di det så. Men det så det kan inte bli där något som är då det. Ja, det. Och the Benny Jenny. What this document primarily is a constitution declaration. It's a modern form of governance. Most of the nations around the world today will develop a constitution. We should say it, but the United States was one of the first ones to create a constitution. They came from the foreign countries. We hold on it, but we stayed on it, and then asked. In those early days, most of the governments at the time had monarchies or other forms of government. Some of them had strongmen. Some of them were led by what we call a theocracy, a religious person, and so forth. So when they were looking at how
It's good.
the government should be developed. Based on some concurrent resolutions, I believe they were of 1978. The Congress passed some concurrent resolution. And in that, they recognized that the structure of the structure of the United States government and the development of a constitution is based on traditional Indian native. I don't know what you guys call yourselves, native, some call themselves Indians. Some call themselves American Indians. Now, the popular phrase they use is indigenous. That's the other home. The Canada, I don't know by it, but we now be in the whole continent. And you see, fishing. Of course. Actually, in that concurrent resolution, they acknowledge that the United States Constitution is based on concepts borrowed or learned from Iroquois nations, the Six Nations. And the Iroquois Nation had the house, or they had what they called a wampum belt. That was their constitution. That was embedded in a belt. Maybe it tells about the history of the Iroquois Confederacy and how they created stability because they were a constant war. How they created a nation with stability and so forth. And they acknowledge and in there they recognize things like who the governing body. And then it acknowledged things like the house of the big brother, house of the little brother, house of the matriarchs, and different housing. So that was kind of the basis of what we currently have in the United States Constitution as recognized by this concurrent resolution. So the concept of constitutions or supreme law and being ruled by laws is native. It's indigenous to the Americans. Native peoples practice their government. And that's the way our world nation was developed and is created. And this history, we talked about governance by how we're governing. One of the key things that up to this day that we have never been asked is how are you gonna govern that nation? Nobody has ever asked us that. Nobody has said, are you gonna have, we have a chief, a king? What about your religious leaders? Age, do we have a strong man, an authoritarian? So we looked at those concepts, and Navajo people historically have always been ruled by what we call Behezani. I don't know how, when they started using Behezani, but that's the concept that we currently use. You get the whole concept of Behezani. Success League, that's the name of the document. And we'll talk about the name here in a minute. But each of the each of the are we looking seeking okay, what is the purpose of life? So we sometimes look at those things, and even today, you see that it's a many training. Each even the city. Okay. Strategie die han visa la ede bahan eki kashin adan so bachen ash ha ide the nada ligo ida that's all of this before our world started. It was just noise. Out of it, the whole geology, no. The Ghana, if you study physics and if you study chemistry, they talk about this thing called the Big Bang. Did I tell you? Then they, but there was a situation where, as a result, I don't even know if it was a big bang explosion. That's the kind of thing we look at. It was probably something different. But it started the formation of life. First, it started into a cloud. Then it started to organize itself. And bacteria and the small critters started to form and so forth. But there you go. We get on that. The critters got bigger, so forth. People that die, no, that's just in there. Oh, I don't think I've got a fish. No, I'm too. No, very good. I don't know how this was. At least Jesus said, oh, there hasn't a fashion, you fashion, but that, no, I type that for the, I think that he put that down. So hasn't. So be credible, is meant that. Okay, Father needs for the yard that, I want to, well, just shut that. The nanny clinic, the nanny clinic, we were in the spiritual form. Oh, nanny father. It's easy. So I know that they, no. So they, you can go on that. We gain our physical existence, our bodies here in this world. The Glena Dia, the whole cut the end of that, because you cut them, yeah, those are there. They got the negative part. But we tell you what, when we gave our physical existence, our bodies, we were reconstituted and our name changed to DN the whole continent. Not from the whole continent. So as we were reconstituted, the name that we were known by changed. Ako, even na DN the whole continent, there's a whole lot. All day, you know. Aro sa channel na nise. At least, what are Navajo people call them? What do Navajo people call themselves? The net actually, the condemnation or start now. I see. I get on now. He the dots in the net, the celestial existence, or the net, will cheap the net. Tell she about the name. Upon the here, you see that those are our ceremonial names in the whole continent. Everything not how we stop. Come out and send on. Of course, at the land, see that as you are sagging the whole continent. Yes, I thought, but it's a lot of it that needs to know. I don't think how. I share how you see the whole continent ever bears on it, but certainly. Yeah. The one that side of getting to it. And if you can't leave the creation, vision state, yeah. The if you when I had the whole continent, I don't bet his army. I don't need the successfully. He should die here. That in that, the art and the successfully the foundation of our laws. Interpret, you know, the foundation of the Navajo people's laws. Aro the date in the area. Sin ceremonial songs. There's over 1,000 ceremonial songs. The faith legend. See the way not a single list, Steve Kell. Cannot single list. No, now got a false car. The Coadias say that sin. It's called the creation of the world. The beast, yeah. So I'm not able to have somebody cow. When they were creating the world. Asian but na Asian Venia they pass up na casual. Asian by the kick on the NASA on yourself. Of course, they're in the website. That mine. Probably. Thought I turned them both on. Anyways. In the document, we start off with a preamble. Right? Okay, this is the table of contents. Then we go to Article 1. All the way down to Article 20. And in each one, there's different provisions. The first one, who we are as to get in the whole continent. Article 1, what the source of government authority is. Navajo Nation Council, we're the governing body down there. On the seat. Navajo Nation, so we put in some definitions for who Navajo Nation is. Then we also said we're going to be ruled by laws, under the rule of law. We're not going to be ruled by a king. We're not going to be ruled by a religious leader. We're not going to be ruled by a strong man. we, the people, are gonna rule ourselves by laws. So if we're gonna do that, somebody has to make the laws. Somebody has to enforce the laws and carry out the laws. And somebody has to interpret and apply the laws to certain disputes. So that's the structure of the government. And if you're gonna create a democracy, right, ruled by the people. Every time we make a law, we can't have 422,000 of us get together to say, oh, this should be the law. So we are going to delegate that responsibility, maybe to a legislative branch, to somebody, right? So that's how the structure evolved. Who our tribal members are. What are your duties, individual? This is the first law that was handed to us, again, over 8 now, we thought it was important to put cat into our. To. We have a KEA, a land tender system. That's probably the biggest change in this whole document is the KEA section, the land tender section. Right now, the Navajo Nation government, the government. KEA, it's a whole snake. It's a KEA, it's not. A lot of the past, the netty, then the KEA that the evil is. What are that the needs have no. Air connect the so. Article 10. Aja for just the government by a day. The government. As I said, I did never Washington up there. The show. Hey, the Washington, head of the government is what that over here they need. That's under these needs. No, the net, Hoshon Japan hat. Pahogan. They need Jindo left. No. We're gonna have elections. Because instead of us 422,000 having to get together and make laws, we're gonna designate a body to make laws on our behalf. But we're gonna reserve the right to make laws ourselves when necessary through the referendum process and the initiative process. So we can still make laws as a group, as a body. But for the most part, we think it'll be easier and more convenient if we elect people to make laws on our behalf. But if they make a law that we don't agree with, we can always override them. We can always change that law that they made and say, nope, we don't like it. We want it this way. So that's what's structured in this section. Elections. Natani, who's the Natani? Elected. We have in Article 2 of the Treaty of 1868, and it comes out of the Worcester case in one of the Marshall trilogies. The Indian tribes have a right to exclude people that are not their tribal members. So this was a Georgia Cherokee case. And the state of Georgia was prevented from applying their laws in the Cherokee Nation. So the US Supreme Court said, recognize that tribes have a right to exclude. So we have a right to exclude section in our document. Then we have the four houses of government. As the government stability branch. We'll talk about that. The legislative branch, people that will be delegated responsibility to make the laws. And we're using Navajo terms, so our young children will have to go back and learn these terms. There's the executive branch. We may change this one to Behez Ani Be on Neshija Baholan instead of Ben Neshija. So that's probably going to change to Behez Ani Be on Neshija Baholan. Then the last one, Behez Ani Be Nahwit Ahaja Baholan. If you paid attention, you'll catch that the end is always Baholan. So we're changing it from the branches, a 3-branch or a 4-branch government to a house. And that's keeping with native traditions. The house of this, the house of that. So that's how this is structured. Then here, home rule and local governance. A chapters of the Zenigi. That another close at no behind it. The Bahas Aro. There will be chief executive officers at divisions. Article 19 is half of the document. Like I said, it's 108 pages. So over 50 pages is dedicated just to Article 19, the divisions and the departments. So we changed those up too. Most of them, there's some new ones in there. The key one is the Secretary of the Navajo Nation. That office will be responsible for elections, our census vital statistics, our records, our archives. And they'll also assist the president in making external policy decisions. So that, and there's a question, and here, do we need a vice president? Right now, we have a president and vice president. After 35 years of practice, do we need a vice president? That's a question that we're posing to everybody. I don't know, we should just continue because we've got used to it. And others say we need somebody to succeed the president. But the theory here is maybe the Secretary of the Navajo Nation, if something happens with the president, would just step up. So we would have a succession. Anyways, those are just things to think about. But that's how it's structured. We start off with the chief fiscal officer, which is a new position. Right now, we really don't have anybody dedicated to investment managing the trust fund and the investments Navajo Nation has. So we create the chief revenue officer, not just taxes, but revenues from all sources. Then we have the executive management and budget officer and so forth. So this is the end. So going right into it. This is basically the document. And for your information, it's going to change based on the public comments and inputs that we get. So this is a draft document. If somebody has a really good idea, understands this stuff, you can send us a comment and some proposals, say this is the way it should be. And you can send it to our email address. It's on some of these papers that we're handing out and so forth. Anyways, we start out with the preamble. The whole cut and the any cleaning. By our collective right, affirm our individual autonomy, unity, and to serve the needs of the whole cut and for unified democratic action, establish justice, provide for a common defense, and to promote our general welfare, enlightenment, posterity, and prosperity, agree upon and establish this whole cut and for the Navajo Nation. Even Natchet Ojo Dosa Hassan Alodoli Gobe Nasi Katon. So that's what preamble provides. And then, as I said, the source of government authority is the Navajo people, because we are the ones that hold the inherent powers of self-governance, right? And we are the ones that entered into the treaty with the United States government in 1868. And we are the ones that are acknowledged and recognized in the United States Constitution. So here's what it says. The powers of independent self-governance is inherent and that they in the whole and acknowledged by the United States Constitution and reserved in the Treaty of 1868 between the Navajo Tribe of Indians and the United States of America. And the Navajo Nation governmental powers is founded on the authority derived from the collective will and consent of the Navajo people for their representation, equal protection, and benefit. And the Navajo people hereby establish a participatory democracy known as the Navajo Nation and retain their inalienable right to alter or reform their government as public welfare may require. So this is a legal document. It's going to be our supreme law. People are going to look at this document and say, what does our supreme law say? And all actions of government, all actions of each one of you will be measured against this document. So today, when the United States Constitution was written in 1776, it was approved, I believe, in 1789. The United States government acknowledged people living among them called Indians, right, in the Constitution. When the U.S. Constitution was made, there was primarily three peoples in the Americas. First was white people that came across the oceans. And with them, they brought slaves, so there was black people here, right? And then there were Indians. The way the U.S. Constitution is written, it's made for white people and maybe black people, but not for Indians. So we weren't included in the United States Constitution when it was drafted. We were looked at as separate nations, separate sovereigns. This is for us, they said. You guys have your own separate independent nations over there. Your own chiefs, your own laws, your own usages, and what have you. This Constitution is for us in the way the U.S. Constitution is drafted by interpretation. And there's words in there we'll talk about. And then, because we were a separate sovereign, the way they dealt with us as Indian tribes is by treaty. They made a treaty agreement. We want some of your land. And we